Hi again, and welcome. Today's essay is called Social Deviance and the Ruling Class in 2021. This was made in February, so it might seem a little bit outdated, but again, I think it's still very relevant in its overall message, so here we go. Now is an interesting time, to say the least, for sociologists to analyze social deviance and how it plays out all around us. If anything, we can observe the fluidity of norms, stigmas, and how we view the other. The actors in the dance of deviance constantly shifting places and challenging what is deviant and what is normal now and in the past. According to critical theories on social deviance, what is and is not considered to be deviant behavior or opinions are not the matter of general social agreement, nor arbitrarily determined. They are instead products of power structures between people within a society. More specifically, conflict theory suggests that social rules and thus what is considered deviant are created by and serve the interests of the powerful and influential. Even more specifically, structural Marxists argue that social rules and norms are designed and created not only in the interests of the individuals within the ruling class, but also to protect and maintain the entire system and hegemony as a whole, which in modern times is capitalism and the bourgeois state that supports it. Through this lens, we can observe a few interesting recent cases of social deviance, how it is interpreted by the ruling class, and how it is observed by the masses. Of course, it is impossible to talk about acts of deviance and the ruling class without mentioning the Capitol riot incident that took place in January, no doubt incited by Donald Trump. This topic has been talked to death by basically everyone who kept up with the news. Yet there might be more to this. There might be a side to the story that many have not thought about from a theoretical approach. Not only were Donald Trump and all those who took part in the incident committing devious acts, this was the culmination of 4 years' worth of what would be considered devious in Western and almost any political system. More importantly for this discussion, however, this may have been the point where many within the bourgeoisie who had previously supported Trump finally saw that backing him was bad for business, as if they needed any more proof that his leadership was faulty, and despite other terrible things that happened during the Trump administration, this was the tipping point. Despite all the populist, or more accurately, class collaborationist rhetoric touted by Trump, and while he was a political outsider, he was no outsider to the ruling class itself, and he had the backing of many of them. During most of Trump's presidency, his leadership threatened the interests of only some within the bourgeois power elite. But once the riots happened, the entire capitalist and state structure was threatened and deemed Trump an irreconcilable adversary. This can be seen clearly after the riots, when many major companies pulled out support from the Republican campaign. Major corporations and Wall Street staples such as Dow Inc., MasterCard, Amazon, Hallmark, AT&T, and many more. Where were they when black people were killed in the streets, when immigrants were in cages, when the wars in the Middle East continued? Nowhere. Only when it threatened the state and all of capital directly did it become a problem for these elites. Trump and his followers pushed the boundaries of the U.S. political environment, rocky and reactionary as it is already. In the end, the system as a whole came together to preserve their interests, and they pushed back hard. This is not to paint Trump as some kind of anti-establishment hero. On the contrary, he was, and still is, a part of the bourgeois strata. His outlandishness and rash decisions simply made him too much of a liability, and he went from being an acceptable outsider to, within the social, political, economic system, to a rejected total outsider. On the other side of things, many more people are accepting of practices that were once stigmatized or considered deviant. Homosexuality was considered a mental illness only 50 years ago, and still heavily taboo 30 years ago. Possessing marijuana in Canada not too long ago could end in a prison sentence. Many issues such as abortion and divorce, all the controversial topics, have become more and more acceptable and open to public debate. The controversy of such issues speaks to the stigma that surrounds them, and they have not yet become totally normalized within our society. But the fact that these types of issues are more in the spotlight and generally considered less taboo than before shows that such acts, choices, or lifestyles are less devious and more normalized. Excuse me. Early on, it was a struggle to advocate and defend things such as gender equality, gay rights, civil rights, and so on. Now, most of the ruling class in our society has accepted these movements and easily adopted them. Companies and governments are trying increasingly to diversify their staff. Commercials and Hollywood movies cast more and more people of color and women in untraditional roles and situations. Perhaps most of all, a woman of color has been elected as vice president of the most powerful country in the world. While all these things seem to be welcome and progressive changes, they are not the result of some benevolent change of heart within the ranks of the ruling class. Just like their reaction to the Capitol riots, it is a calculated change enacted for the purpose of self-preservation. The fact has not changed that still an overwhelming amount of those within the ruling capitalist class are white and male, but by incorporating and encouraging other historically more disadvantaged groups, they have, for one, a broader customer/consumer and support base, and they are taking the path of least resistance. During the past couple of years, the bourgeoisie class in the West have seen examples of both extreme reaction to Trump presidency and their support, and real radical resistance from Black Lives Matter and Antifa. For them, neither are good for business, thus are deviant. One is too unstable and overt in their intentions and goals, the other challenges everything they stand for. To maintain complete hegemony, the ruling class must avoid both. So, we have the neoliberal standard, cheering on and supporting these progressive causes on one hand, but doing very little to solve the basic root of these real issues. It is a deeply entwined in the contradictions of the system with those who in power support. For example, a woman of color may be the vice president of the United States, but how much will that improve the lives of women of color in the country or in other oppressed people around the world, especially those that are living under the burden of imperialism and colonialism, which the U.S. system perpetuates? In the end, our society in 2021 seems to be increasingly tolerant to many groups of people who are stigmatized or considered outsiders. There is no doubt a marked improvement, but it should be remembered that what is deemed acceptable in social behavior is determined by those with power, more specifically those with economic and political power, the bourgeoisie. Not only does it conform to the interests of the individuals within the capitalist state apparatus, but it also suits the interests of best preserving the system as a whole. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.